Hey everybody, Erin Knight here with our special guest, Dr. Titus Chiu, to talk with us about some really cool and innovative ways to overcome stress and anxiety if you're suffering with migraines, and kind of the link between the two, and how you can use your senses to improve both of those. And I think it's just really fascinating topic, and I'm honored that you're coming on to talk with us today. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me, Aaron. Yeah, this is a topic that I'm really excited about sharing with, because a lot of times when people think about, chronic migraines or anxiety or issues with the nervous system, there's not too many options out there, especially within conventional medicine, that people can really take on themselves and do things to change their own life. So that's one thing that I really want to share with you all today is, like you said, like different things that you can do if you're suffering from anxiety or stress or just kind of like this baseline uneasiness. And there is a strong correlation between, the neurological root cause for that and chronic migraine. So I'll be talking about that today and kind of where they all converge in the nervous system and different things that your audience and people watching out there can do.
Oh yeah, I should back up and say too, Dr. Chiu is a functional neurologist, which you don't come across every day, and has a unique insights into migraines and specializes in like complex chronic neurological diseases. And I haven't heard people talk really about how like feeling uneasy, worried, stressed is linked to the nervous system. For some reason, those are often seen as two separate issues. So can you talk to us like how that's linked together, or what that might have to do with our nervous system that also impacts then our migraines and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any feeling or emotion that we experience is a product of our brains. It's like a product of what's happening within our brain, specific different structures of our brain. So different areas of our brain, if they're overactive or underactive, can lead to emotions like happiness or sadness or anxiety, or just like I said, this underlying uneasiness or just feeling worried all the time. And so there's a lot of correlation and link between certain foods and certain neurotransmitters and certain types of chemicals or toxins that could a person could be dealing with or have. But at the end of the day, it's if those things impact the brain, that's when a person can experience anxiety or depression or any emotion really.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was saying, so a lot of the time those brain structures, so in the case of, for example, anxiety,
Yeah.
one of the key brain structures that we find that's implicated in is this area we call the frontal lobe. Okay, and so the frontal lobe is really important because what it does, it helps us kind of focus our attention, focus our thoughts on different things, and it helps us to actually suppress the more fight or flight responses that we all have, like those reflexes.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the frontal lobe is either not working well enough, okay, we can suffer things like depression. Specifically, the left frontal lobe, they found that if the left frontal lobe, they've done a lot of research and functional MRI studies, if the left frontal lobe isn't activated as well as the right, a person ends up suffering from depression.
Wow.
And conversely, a lot of the functional MRI studies and research has shown that if the right frontal lobe is too active, then a person can actually suffer from anxiety. And so what is anxiety really? If you think about it, even if you haven't been diagnosed, I'm sure we all have had moments in our lives where we felt anxious. Like, for example, like if, what's the nearest example? So sometimes for me, it's like social situations, I don't have social anxiety, but I might, go out and meet some people for the first time. And then after I come home, I'm like thinking in my head, oh, did I say the right thing? Did I do something? Like, how did I come off? And so that's like my own issues I've kind of worked through my whole life. But I've noticed this pattern where I kind of perseverate on this worrisome thought. Mm-hmm. And that is like an anxious state. So it's not like I go around all day, every day with this general anxiousness, but that's my definition of anxiety. It's like where you actually think about something that happened in the past, you perseverate on it and you worry about it, or you think about things that might happen that might not be, like a negative kind of filter on things, that something might happen in the future, right?
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is when you kind of look at it from that lens and not even need a diagnosis, but just like, have you ever had experiences of that? How often is that like kind of like this baseline setting, or does it happen just once in a while? Regardless, it's these areas of the nervous system that I talked about, the right frontal lobe, that is overactive. That's one of the areas.
And we've seen, if people watch the Migraine Summit this summer, they'll remember we talked with Trudy Scott about anxiety and how common the overlap is between people with migraines and either anxiety or depression. I mean, it's 60% of the migraine population have some significant experiences with those or identify with those conditions. So why do you think it's more prevalent than in the general population? Like, what's the overlap there?
Yeah, so again, I think for me, I always look at it through a neurological framework, a neurological filter. Why would one symptom show up and then another one and kind of happen together a lot? And the answer again is because it's similar areas of the brain. So for example, with chronic migraines, what a lot of the research says and what I see in a lot of my practice is there's an area of the nervous system called the brainstem. Okay. And we find that specifically the brainstem is broken up into three regions. There's a top, middle, and then a bottom region, right? And so specifically we find that the top region that we call the mesencephalon or midbrain, that's overactive. And so what the mesencephalon does, and it makes sense for all you people out there who suffer from migraines, what's one of the common symptoms? Light sensitivity, right? And sound sensitivity. And so this area of the brainstem that we call the mesencephalon, guess what it processes? Light and sound, right? And so if that area is just hyper, reactive or overactive, then when light's coming, it's going to be too much for a person. Or when sounds come in, normal sounds that if you're not in the midst of a migraine attack that normally wouldn't bother you are just like excruciating. But that's the thing, I found that people with chronic migraines in general, that area overall, the baseline is set a bit higher.
That makes a lot of sense. Like compared to my colleagues and stuff like that, I was always, even if I wasn't having migraines that week, that month, or basically anymore, I was a lot more sensitive to bad lighting or really noisy environments than other people. And
yeah, exactly. And from a neurological standpoint, one of the key structures that's at the root cause for that symptom is the mesencephalon or the midbrain, which sits at the top of the brainstem. So other things that the mesencephalon is responsible for, it actually sets the tone for the autonomic nervous system, specifically the fight or flight response. So again, if the mesencephalon is overactive, and it could kind of fluctuate throughout the day or times of the year. But at the end of the day, it's the mesencephalon that sets these things. If that's overactive, you can have what I described, light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, but also the fight or flight response is just kind of set a little bit higher
than everybody else. Yeah.
That's one of the ties with correlation with anxiety.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's so reassuring. As somebody maybe who, hi Alexis, somebody who is feeling either high stress or diagnosis of anxiety, they might feel like it's their fault that they have migraines because they're that. When in fact, if it's the same biological cause, it's not so much of like, yeah, go relax, go chill out, you'll be fine, you'll stop having migraines, which it's really aggravating to hear, but at the same time, like I think there was some sentiment of that coming towards people with migraines for a long time, and to uncover or to understand that there's similar root causes and that it's really coming out of our biology that both of these things are happening instead of the anxiety is causing this or the migraine is causing this. It's more of like, let's take care of our body, soothe all that down, soothe that hyperactivity, and then both things are going to improve.
Exactly. And that's how I approach when I work with clients and patients is I look at the bigger picture. It's like, okay, for example, with anxiety or just being kind of more high strung in general, there is definitely psychological like mindset outlook that impacts that. But at the same time, that's totally overlooked, especially in conventional medicine. There are these biological root causes that are found within the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever I work with clients, it's like, let's get the body in order, right? Let's do things to help calm inflammation down. Let's do things to help blow out excessive carbon dioxide. Because again, when we go talk about the mesencephalon, there's an area in the mesencephalon that has a very high density of carbon dioxide receptors as well as inflammatory receptors. Like you guys probably know what cytokines are, those pro-inflammatory mediators that cause inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, within the mesencephalon, there's these receptors that sense the amount of carbon dioxide as well as the amount of things such as interleukin-6, which is a cytokine that causes inflammation. So when those things are elevated, guess what that does to the mesencephalon? The overall, again, the set baseline ramps up. And so even if there are, mindset issues and belief systems and just overall stress that needs to be taken care of, using things like mindfulness or using, the mind itself to calm, if this baseline is set so high, it's so hard to break through that noise that a lot of times, again, with my patients, we start with, what are some things we can do to calm the mesencephalon? So then you have like this moment where you can, be present and then engage the higher centers of the nervous system, like the frontal lobe, through meditation, through stress management, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important to kind of do things in the right order to have the most impact. And usually I like to start again from the bottom, then moving our ways up. So meaning what's happening in the body, like in the gut. How can we balance out the gut? What's happening in the brainstem in this area called the mesencephalon? How can we calm the mesencephalon? And finally, at that point, many times, a lot of those symptoms of migraines or anxiety just melt away. But if then they continue to be there, maybe at not such a high level, then it's like, okay, what are things we can do to actually like get the frontal lobes stronger, things like meditation, kind of reframing situations, using labeling, things like that.
That'll take some time, but I understand you have some pretty cool tricks up your sleeve when it comes to engaging the senses and kind of getting some quick breakthroughs and things like that. So is there anything you'd like to share with us in that angle?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I do is I'm a functional neurologist and I specialize in healing the brain using the 5 common senses. And so what I mean by this, the sense of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And there's actually 2 bonus senses that not many people think about or realize that we can use therapeutically, but there's the sense of proprioception, which is this awareness of where our body is in space.
Oh.
So for example, if you close your eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and you raise your arms up like this, right? And you're holding your arms up. How do you know your arms are in that position? It's not the sense of smell. It's not the sense of taste. You're not tasting your arm, right? That's what we call proprioception. And the way that works is just like with our eyeballs, we have these little sensors in the back of our eyeballs that pick up light and color and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Every single joint and muscle in our body, we have movement detectors that tell us where our body is relative to our environment or the rest of our body. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it kind of does make sense because I like to go like ballroom dancing and social dancing and stuff like that. And sometimes you may even close your eyes, but you still know like what
where your
body is taking, and you might even be moving forward at the same time, and it totally hurts. So that's something like maybe you can develop over time. Would you say?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the concept of using the 5 common senses to literally heal and rewire the brain is through this process we call neuroplasticity, which is, it's this special, unique ability of our brain to be able to literally change its structure and function based on our experiences. And one of the most powerful, constant experiences we have are experiences through our five senses.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like you said, when you learn how to ballroom dance, maybe at first you're not very good, but the more you practice it, you have better awareness of your body.
Where your body should be. Yeah.
Exactly. And literally what's happening is there are these structures within the nervous system that are getting stronger, specifically what we call the cerebellum, basal ganglia, thalamus, and the frontal lobe. And so that's the thing, when you get, probably for you, if you like ballroom dancing and you practice and you got really good, eventually you can close your eyes. You don't even need vision to know where your body is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing, guess what? A lot of my clients that I see in my office that suffer from chronic migraines, that suffer from anxiety, their body awareness is totally off, right?
Wow.
And so that's the thing. That's another root cause I find, a biological root cause for chronic migraines and especially anxiety. So a simple test that I do in my practice is what's known as a Romberg's test. It's a neurological test where you put your feet together. And those of you out there, if you want to try this out, yeah, let's just do it. You stand up and you put your feet together. So it sounds like you have pretty good body awareness, especially when you're moving or you're doing things like falling. So yeah, but then we can actually tease apart any subtleties. So put your feet together as close as you can.
Okay.
And then get a sense for your balance now.
Okay.
Okay, and when you're ready, close your eyes. So you look pretty, I'm watching you, and you look pretty solid. You're starting to sway a little bit more as I start to talk to you. I can actually notice you start to sway more. So that tells me when you're closing, your proprioception, like a baseline, is pretty good. But then when I start talking to you, either it's like you're trying to like listen to what I'm saying, or it's like just the sound of it throws you off.
Wow.
But that makes perfect sense because, like I said, so what's actually happening within your nervous system? When I talk to you, that sends a signal into which area? The mesencephalon, right? Which is related to everything we talked about. And if the mesencephalon can't process that, or your brainstem, then that's going to throw off your sense of where you are in space, and that can trigger some neurological symptoms. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really cool.
And so the people out there, people in the audience who just watch that, if they did that, I'm sure there's people out there when they actually just put their feet close together, they already felt unsteady. So that tells us that proprioception, that body awareness, and then that's a clue into different areas of the nervous system. It's not working optimally. And that's one of the root causes I see a lot, again, in anxiety as well as chronic migraines.
Okay, so what could somebody do if they were swaying? Like, how do they just kind of practice that, or is there any like shortcuts to improve that? Absolutely. How does that work?
So there's several things they can do. So some things they can do on their own, and some things they can do with a trained professional. So things that someone, if you know, for example, if you out there, when you closed your eyes and you felt like you're swaying, you almost fell over, or you maybe started feeling dizzy, or maybe even started feeling a little anxious. If that's you out there, what you can start doing is when you're at your, when you're at your, in your bathroom in the morning, when you're brushing your teeth, you just balance on one foot. And you balance on one foot, and what that does is that'll train this area we call your cerebellum, which is really important for body awareness. And you just
your eyes have to be closed, or you're just trying to challenge yourself while you're just acting a little bit?
Exactly. So I recommend the first step, if when you put your feet together and you close your eyes, you felt out of balance, do it with your eyes open first. So just balance with the left foot with your eyes open, and then balance with the right foot. And you might find that one's harder than the other. That's the one you want to focus on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And just balance on your foot. I recommend shooting for a goal of 60 seconds without having to put your other foot down.
Wow.
Once you reach that 60 seconds, then you can try closing your eyes. And I guarantee you, it's going to be a lot harder. So the key is you want to make sure you're able to do it kind of like step by step. So each step of the way, you kind of reach like, okay, 60 seconds with eyes open, eventually 60 seconds with eyes closed. then you might want to try doing it with brushing your teeth. Make sense? Yeah, because I guarantee you, if you try to balance with your one foot, eyes closed, and brush your teeth, especially if you're just putting your feet together and closing your eyes and you feel off balance, it's going to be difficult.
And your dental hygiene may suffer. So it's
yeah, you can have really clean teeth
pretty much.
Yeah, so that's one thing, just to kind of summarize. So I use the 5 common senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And then there's 2 other ones that are really important. Proprioceptive is, I think, one of the most important ones. And those are different ways you can train that. Especially if you suffer from anxiety and chronic migraines, a lot of people out there have some level of imbalance in their proprioceptive. And you start training that, it doesn't just mean that you're strengthening your leg or your ability to balance. It actually means you're developing neuroplasticity exactly in your cerebellum and your frontal lobe. So that's one thing. Cool. Yeah, it's like simple things you can do. And another way, and I'm actually trained both as a neurologist, nutritionist, and a chiropractor, and that's how chiropractic works. Have you ever been adjusted, Erin? Yeah. So when you go to your chiropractor, whether they realize it or not, when they palpate your spine and they feel that restriction, and then they make that chiropractic adjustment, what that does is it triggers a proprioceptive signal into the cerebellum, one of the most powerful ways of doing that. So when you ask me, are there shortcuts? One of the fastest ways of retraining proprioception is through chiropractic.
Oh.
Yeah. Another thing, so I encourage all of you out there who, if you've never tried chiropractic, it changed my life. Like, it changed my wife's life. That's why we do this stuff. And find yourself a good chiropractor. And if you go to a chiropractor and you don't have the best experience, trust me, there's different types of kinds out there. Totally. Yeah, exactly. There's some that are more like stronger adjustments that some people need. Like in our practice, we work with a lot of sensitive people with brain issues or autoimmunity, so we use a lot more gentle techniques. But I guarantee you, one of the best things that you can do if you suffer from chronic migraines and anxiety is find a good, solid chiropractor. Yeah,
that's something that really helped me get over the hump of suffering a lot, so that I could focus on the nutrition and lifestyle things to get everything under control. Because if you're always in pain and having symptoms, then you can't really start meal prepping and stuff like that. You just can't wrap your head around that. But chiropractic took it from really being a problem to being more in maintenance mode. Whereas if I went regularly, I wasn't getting them. And that's kind of when I started to work on other things too. And eventually I didn't have to go. So I had to go back. And a lot of people will go to the chiropractor for years and years because they're not getting better. But I would say that's an opportunity to work on inflammation and gut healing and stuff like that. And eventually you don't have to go back. But if you just see it as a Band-Aid, then you can get stuck in that mode a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Erin, because that's the thing. Like, a lot of people that me and my wife see in our practice, they're not doing too well. They've kind of stuck, and they might be dealing with autoimmunity, or they might be dealing with chronic migraines, anxiety. They just don't have the energy to do the meal prepping, or even think about getting rid of the gluten, or all these different things can feel overwhelming, especially when you're just starting out. And that was our experience. Like, when I was dealing with chronic pain, I actually didn't know anything about eating healthy, about gluten sensitivities, dairy, a supplementation, lifestyle, meditation. I didn't know any of that. And so my brother, Dr. Titus Chiu, I went to see him, after I was in this really bad car accident in Japan, and I ended up suffering a mild concussion and dislocating my shoulder, breaking my ribs, and I was in chronic pain, and if anyone had told me at that time, okay, this is what you need to do. You need to change your diet. You need to change the way you look at the world. You need to start meditating 5 times a day for the next 360 days. I'd be like, next, please. That's too much. And so what he did was he just adjusted me, within 3 sessions, completely changed my life. And my wife, same thing. She was dealing with chronic anxiety and depression, and at the time autoimmunity, but she didn't even know that, right? And it was her chiropractor who kind of took her by the hand. She just showed up. I just showed up. We got adjusted. And that gave us the energy to then take on the other things, because it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's like kind of like this glimmer of hope. And,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. So that's what we like to do when we work with people. It's like, okay, depending on where you're at in your journey, depending on how serious your situation is, there's always things you can do. Just show up, get adjusted, and things will get better from there. Then we can have a conversation about nutrition. Then we can have a conversation about, supplementation, lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but my point is, again, it's like one of the ways that chiropractic works is actually through the nervous system. When you do an adjustment in a person's spine, when I do that, it sends a signal up their spinal cord into their cerebellum, and then it actually talks to the frontal lobe. And chiropractic creates neuroplasticity in the brain. And that's why it works great for so many different things, like chronic migraines and anxiety, depression, chronic pain, all these things.
Totally. This has been like absolutely enlightening and hopefully really helpful to our audience today. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of these tips, practical tips, and also just insights into how the brain works. It's so cool to hear it straight from a neurologist that's helped a lot of people with migraines. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
I know you're speaking on lots of summits these days, but you have one coming up that we'd like to share with everybody called Healing Hashimoto's. So are you talking about similar things on that event?
Yeah, exactly. So that online summit, that's going to be airing the first week in November.
Mm-hmm.
So that's through Hey Hashi's. It's a nonprofit organization. They're dedicated to sharing resources and helping reverse Hashimoto's and helping people suffering from Hashimoto's. And so I'm featured on there. I'm going to be giving a 1-hour interview. Actually, me and my wife, we give an interview on the root cause for anxiety and 7 DIY tips that you can do to stop anxiety immediately. Wow. So please tune into that. If any of you out there are suffering from anxiety, and again, even if you haven't been diagnosed, if you just have this overall underlying sense of just stress or uneasiness, I talk about the root cause for all of that and give 7 DIY tips to address that root cause.
Okay, I love it. And where else can people learn more about you? What's your website?
You can check out my website. It's themodernbrain.com.
Modernbrain.com. And if you look up Dr. Chiu on Facebook, he also does lots of awesome sharings and quick tip videos too. So check him out on Facebook.
I love education. So.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much. Have an awesome day, everybody.
Thank you, Erin.